The transport ship touched down on Catamaran with a soft hiss of landing thrusters. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small window and watched red dust swirl around the ship's legs. The planet looked empty and dead, but she knew better. Under all that red dirt lay secrets that had been waiting for thousands of years. Sarah grabbed her equipment bag and followed the others out of the ship. The air felt thin and cold even through her breathing mask. Commander Vextar stepped out first, his tall blue body moving like water. The Zephyrian's large black eyes swept across the landscape, reading thoughts and emotions from the very rocks around them. "I sense great age here," Vextar said, his voice echoing strangely in their minds. "Something sleeps beneath our feet." Engineer Krosnook stomped down the ramp next. The Granite Clan member looked like a walking boulder, gray skin marked with crystal veins that glowed softly. When he walked, the ground shook a little. "Good solid rock," he rumbled in a voice like grinding stone. "This planet will not break under our feet." Scholar Yathara floated down last, her silver body thin and graceful. The Mindweaver's head was twice the size of a human head, filled with a brain that could solve math problems faster than most computers. "The mineral composition suggests this world once had oceans," she said, analyzing data that flowed across her tablet. "Very interesting geological patterns." Sarah felt small next to her alien teammates. Humans were new to space travel compared to these ancient races. The Zephyrians had been reading minds across the galaxy for 10,000 years. The Granite Clan had built cities that lasted for centuries. The Mindweavers had discovered faster-than-light travel when humans were still learning to make fire. But Sarah was here because humans noticed things others missed. They called it curiosity. Other races called it being nosy. "The ruins should be 2 kilometers north," Sarah said, checking her scanner. The satellite images showed a large structure, mostly underground. They walked across the rocky ground, following ancient roads that were now just lines of different colored stone. Sarah took pictures of everything while the others used their special abilities. Vextar felt for psychic echoes from the past. Krosnook tested the strength of old walls and bridges. Yathara measured and calculated every detail. After an hour of walking, they found it. A hole in the ground, perfectly round with smooth steps leading down into darkness. The steps were made of black stone that seemed to drink in light. "These steps are not natural," Yathara announced after scanning them. "The stone contains elements that do not exist in this system's periodic table." "I feel something down there," Vextar said, touching his long fingers to his temple. "Old thoughts, very old, but also waiting." Krosnook picked up a loose rock and threw it down the hole. They listened for a long time before hearing it hit bottom. "Deep," he said, "but the walls are strong. We can go down." Sarah turned on her headlamp and started down the steps. "Let's see what they left behind." The steps went down for what felt like forever. The walls around them changed from rough rock to smooth metal to something that looked like crystal but felt warm to touch. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing, faintly in colors that hurt to look at directly. "I cannot read these symbols," Yathara said, running her scanners over the walls. "They do not match any known language database." "The thoughts here are too old," Vextar added, "like trying to hear whispers from across an ocean." Finally, the steps ended. They found themselves in a huge underground chamber with a ceiling so high their lights could not reach it. The floor was made of the same warm crystal as the walls. In the center of the room stood a platform, and on that platform was something that made them all stop walking. A sword. It stood straight up, its blade pushed into a block of metal that looked like liquid silver frozen in time. The sword's handle was wrapped in leather that looked fresh, as if someone had put it there yesterday. The blade itself seemed to be made of metal that shifted color in their lights, sometimes silver, sometimes gold, sometimes colors that had no names. "Fascinating," Yathara whispered, approaching with her scanners running. "The metal composition is impossible. My sensors cannot identify what it is made of." Vextar closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. "There is consciousness in this blade, not alive but not dead either. It is Aware. Krosnook walked around the platform, studying it from every angle. The platform is one piece. No joints, no seams. Whoever made this carved it from a single block of metal larger than my clan's greatest sculptures. Sarah took pictures and made notes, but her eyes kept going back to the sword. There was something about it that made her want to touch it, not because it looked valuable or powerful, but because it looked lonely. The walls around the chamber were covered in more symbols. These were different from the ones on the steps. They seemed to tell a story, with pictures mixed in with the strange writing. Sarah could make out figures that might have been people or aliens or something else entirely. They seemed to be doing important things, building cities, exploring space, fighting wars, making peace. "Look at this," Sarah called out, pointing her light at one section of wall. "This looks like a star map, and this part, it might be showing the history of whoever lived here." Vexitar joined her, pressing his palm against the wall. "I sense echoes of great sadness here, and hope. They were saying goodbye to something. Or someone," Sarah said quietly. Ithara had finished her scans of the sword. "The energy readings are extraordinary. The blade generates its own power field, but I cannot determine the source. It appears to be waiting for something." "Or someone," Krosnook said, copying Sarah's words. They set up their equipment around the chamber, taking detailed scans and photographs. Sarah worked on copying the wall symbols while the others tested different theories about the sword and platform. As the hours passed, Sarah noticed something strange. The symbols on the walls seemed to change when she was not looking directly at them. Not completely, but small details shifted. A line here, a curve there, as if the walls were trying to tell her something. "Does anyone else notice the walls changing?" she asked. The others looked where she pointed. "I see no changes," Ithara said after checking her recorded scans. "The symbols are exactly the same as when we arrived." "My mind touches only silence from the walls," Vexitar said, "but the sword grows more restless." Krosnook placed his heavy hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Human eyes see things differently than ours. What do you see?" Sarah studied the walls again. The symbols definitely moved when she was not watching them directly. "I think they are trying to tell us something about the sword, about who can use it. Many ancient civilizations created tests for their artifacts," Ithara said. "Perhaps this sword requires some kind of worthiness trial. Or maybe it just needs the right person to pick it up," Sarah said. They made camp in the chamber that night. Sarah lay in her sleeping bag, staring up at the invisible ceiling. In the darkness, she could swear she heard something. Not a sound. Exactly. But something like music played very softly. It seemed to come from the sword. She was not the only one who noticed. Krosnook's crystal veins glowed brighter in his sleep, responding to some unknown energy. Vexitar's breathing changed, as if he was having vivid dreams. Ithara's computers beeped quietly as they recorded energy spikes throughout the night. Something was definitely waiting in this place. The question was, waiting for what? When morning came, Sarah knew they had to try to lift the sword. The chamber, the symbols, the dreams, everything pointed to that blade being the key to understanding this place. But who should try first? The morning light from their portable lamps made the sword gleam like captured starlight. Sarah watched as her 3 alien teammates stood around the platform, each one confident they would be the one to lift the ancient blade. "I should go first," Commander Vexitar said, his tall blue form moving gracefully toward the sword. "My people have been connecting with ancient artifacts for 10,000 years. If this blade has consciousness, I can speak with it." The others stepped back to give him room. Sarah held her breath as Vexitar placed his long fingers around the sword's handle. His black eyes closed and she could feel the air around them change as he reached out with his mind. Vexitar's face showed deep concentration. His telepathic abilities were legendary. He could read the history of objects just by touching them, speak with computer systems that had been dead for centuries, even sense the thoughts that ancient builders had while making their creations. "I feel resistance," he said, his mental voice echoing in their heads. "The sword acknowledges me, but there is a barrier, like a door that will not open." His muscles tensed as he tried to lift the blade. Nothing happened. Vextar pulled harder, his entire body straining. His telepathic powers pushed against whatever force held the sword in place. Sarah could almost see the mental energy flowing from him, bright and powerful. But the sword remained perfectly still, as if it were made of solid stone instead of metal. After 5 minutes of trying, Vextar stepped back, breathing hard. "I cannot understand it," he said, confused. "The sword knows I am here. It responds to my mental touch, but it will not move. Perhaps it requires physical strength rather than mental power." Krosnook rumbled, stepping forward. The Granite Clan engineer cracked his knuckles, and the sound echoed through the chamber like breaking rocks. Krosnook was the strongest being Sarah had ever met. His people moved mountains to build their cities. They worked with metals so heavy that other races needed machines just to lift small pieces. If anyone could force the sword to move through pure strength, it would be him. The big alien wrapped both hands around the sword's handle. His crystal veins began to glow brighter as he prepared to lift. "No blade forged by any civilization can resist the strength of the Granite Clan," he said confidently. Krosnook pulled. His muscles, dense as rock and twice as strong, bulged with effort. The crystals in his skin blazed with light as he used every bit of his incredible strength. The platform shook slightly under his feet, but the sword did not move even a tiny bit. "Impossible," Krosnook grunted, pulling harder. His strength could lift starship engines, bend metal beams, crush diamonds in his bare hands. But the sword acted like it was welded to the platform. Sarah watched small cracks appear in the crystal floor around Krosnook's feet as he strained. The alien was using so much force that he was breaking the ground beneath him, but the sword remained unmoved. Finally, Krosnook let go and stepped back, shaking his head. "I have never encountered anything I could not move," he said, staring at his hands in disbelief. "That blade weighs nothing, yet it might as well be part of the planet itself." "This is most intriguing," Scholar Yathara said, floating forward. "Clearly this is not a test of mental or physical power. It must be a puzzle requiring intellectual analysis." Yathara's silver form hovered beside the sword as her enhanced brain began working through possibilities. Her people, the Mind Weavers, could calculate faster than most computers. They understood the universe through mathematics and logic. "Let me analyze the quantum structure," she said, pulling out several advanced scanning devices. "Every object has specific resonance frequencies. If I can determine the correct harmonic sequence, I should be able to disrupt whatever field is holding the blade in place." For the next hour, Yathara ran every test she could think of. She measured the sword's molecular vibration, calculated its mass distribution, analyzed the energy field surrounding it. Her scanners hummed and beeped as they gathered data that would take normal computers days to process. "The mathematics are extraordinary," she reported, her large head tilted in concentration. "The sword exists in a quantum state that should be impossible. It is simultaneously heavy and weightless, ancient and new, metal and energy." She reached for the handle, with confidence. "I have calculated the exact frequency needed to phase shift the quantum lock. This should work." Yathara grasped the sword and activated a small device that created specific sound waves. The chamber filled with a low humming noise as she tried to unlock whatever force held the blade. Her calculations were perfect, her understanding of physics unmatched among the known races. The sword did not budge. "This defies all known scientific principles," Yathara said, trying different frequencies. "According to my analysis, this should work. The mathematics are correct." But no matter what approach she took, quantum resonance, gravitational manipulation, electromagnetic field disruption, the sword remained firmly in place. One by one, other members of the expedition tried. Dr. Kithara, a crystalline whose people could reshape matter with their minds, could not even make the sword vibrate. Captain Vorth, a flame walker whose race controlled energy itself, could not affect the blade at all. Even the ship's AI, speaking through a robotic body, analyzed every possible approach and failed. Each failure made the mystery deeper, The sword seemed to be waiting for something specific. But what? It was not a test of strength, intelligence, mental power, or technological skill. Every species in the expedition represented the peak of their race's abilities, yet none could lift the blade. Sarah stood watching all these attempts, taking notes and photographs. As the only human in the group, she felt like an observer rather than a participant. Humans were too new to space travel to be experts at anything. They were decent at many things, but not the best at any one thing. Perhaps the sword requires a specific genetic pattern, suggested Dr. Moran, a shapeshifter who could alter her DNA at will. But even when she copied the genetic patterns of extinct races found in the chamber's database, the sword would not move. Maybe it needs a pure energy being, offered Lieutenant Spark, whose race had evolved beyond physical form. But when he tried to interface with the sword directly as living electricity, nothing happened. By evening, 17 different aliens had tried to lift the sword. Each one represented a different approach: mental power, physical strength, technological skill, genetic adaptation, energy manipulation, matter control, time perception, dimensional shifting. Every attempt failed. Sarah watched Vextar try again, this time combining his telepathic abilities with Krosnuk's strength and Yathara's calculations. Even working together, the three most powerful beings she knew could not make the sword move. "Do not understand," Vextar said, exhausted from the effort. "The sword responds to us. It knows we are here, but it refuses every attempt to claim it." "Perhaps we are missing something," Yathara suggested. "Some piece of information that would explain the selection criteria." Krosnuk sat heavily on the crystal floor, his massive form showing rare signs of fatigue. "In my clan's legends, there are stories of weapons that chose their own wielders, but those were just stories." Sarah looked at the wall symbols again. In the lamplight, they seemed to dance and shift, telling a story she could almost understand. The figures in the pictures looked different from any of the alien races she knew. They were smaller, less specialized, more balanced. "What if," she said quietly, "the sword is not looking for the strongest or smartest or most powerful person?" The others turned to look at her. "What do you mean, human Sarah?" Vextar asked. Sarah studied the sword, thinking about something that had been bothering her all day. Every race here is amazing at something specific. But what if this ancient civilization valued something different? What if they were looking for balance instead of specialization? "An interesting theory," Yathara said. "But how would we test it?" Sarah looked around at her teammates, beings who could read minds, lift mountains, calculate faster than computers, and perform feats that seemed like magic to human eyes. Then she looked at herself. Average height, average strength, average intelligence by galactic standards. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the sword was waiting for. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "I should try." The chamber fell silent when Sarah spoke. Her alien teammates looked at her with expressions ranging from surprise to polite skepticism. In the soft glow of their equipment lights, Sarah felt very small and very human. "You want to try?" Vextar asked gently. His telepathic voice carried no mockery, but Sarah could sense his doubt. "Sarah, we have had 17 attempts by beings with abilities far beyond human capability." "No offense intended," Yathara added quickly. "But humans are still quite new to galactic civilization. Your species has many admirable qualities, but physical or mental transcendence is not among them." Krosnuk rumbled in agreement. "The human is brave, but this blade has resisted the strength of mountains and the wisdom of ages. What could humanity offer that we cannot?" Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. They were right, of course. Humans were the newcomers in space, the junior partners in every expedition. While other races had evolved amazing abilities over millions of years, humans had only left their home planet a few centuries ago. But something about the wall symbols kept nagging at her. The figures carved into the crystal looked so familiar, not because she had seen them before, but because they reminded her of something. "I know it sounds crazy," Sarah said, walking closer to the platform. "But look at these wall carvings, really look at them. She pointed her light at different sections of the chamber walls. See how the figures in these pictures are not specialized. Like our races? They do not have the tall, graceful forms of the Zephyrians or the massive strength of the Granite clan. They look ordinary. Vexter examined the carvings with his enhanced vision. They do appear to be of average physical development, he admitted. But that hardly seems like a qualification for claiming an ancient weapon. What if it is not about what we can do? Sarah asked. What if it is about what we are? She had been thinking about this all day, watching her teammates try and fail despite their incredible abilities. Each race was perfect at their specialty, but limited in other ways. The Zephyrians were amazing telepaths but physically fragile. The Granite clan was incredibly strong but slow to adapt. The Mindweavers could calculate anything but struggled with emotional decisions. Humans were different. They were not the best at anything, but they were decent at everything. They could think and feel and adapt and create all at the same time. Other races called it being unfocused. But what if the ancient civilization had seen it as being complete? I do not think this is wise, Dr. Kithara said from across the chamber. The crystalline's voice tinkled like wind chimes. If the sword has some kind of defense mechanism, it might harm an unprotected human. The energy readings show no hostile intent, Ythara reported, checking her scanners. But there is definitely something different happening when Sarah approaches the platform. Sarah had noticed it too. The sword seemed to hum more quietly when she got close, and the wall symbols appeared to shift more actively. It was like the chamber was paying attention to her in a way it had not done for the others. Let me try, Sarah said, stepping onto the platform. If it does not work, at least we will know for sure. Her teammates moved back to give her space, but she could feel their concern. Krosnuk positioned himself close enough to grab her if something went wrong. Vextar extended his mental senses to monitor for danger. Ythara had her medical scanners ready. Sarah stood before the sword and really looked at it for the first time. Up close, she could see that the metal was not just changing colors, it was showing images. Tiny pictures flowed across the blade's surface like a movie. She saw stars being born, planets forming, life growing and changing and reaching for the sky. The handle felt warm under her fingers, as if it had been waiting for her touch. The leather wrapping was soft and comfortable, perfectly sized for a human hand, but that was impossible. This sword was thousands of years old, made by aliens who had never seen a human. Unless the energy readings are spiking, Ythara announced, her voice tight with excitement. Something is definitely responding to Sarah's presence. Sarah closed her eyes and wrapped her fingers around the sword's handle. The moment she made contact, the world changed. Images flooded her mind, not forced into her thoughts like Vextar's telepathy, but offered gently like memories from a friend. She saw the ancient civilization that had built this place. They looked remarkably like humans. 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes that showed curiosity and hope and sadness. They had not been the strongest race in their galaxy, or the smartest, or the most advanced. They had been explorers and builders and dreamers, good at many things but masters of none. They had survived not through superior abilities but through cooperation and adaptation, and an endless desire to understand the universe around them. And they had been dying. Not from war or disease, but from evolution itself. Their children were being born more and more specialized, losing the balance that had made their species great. Some became pure intellect, others pure emotion, others pure instinct. They were splitting apart, becoming separate races that could no longer understand each other. So they had built this chamber, hidden this sword, and left a message for whoever would come after them. They had created a test that could only be passed by someone who still carried the spark of balanced consciousness, the ability to think and feel and dream all at once. The sword lifted from its resting place as easily as picking up a feather. The moment the blade cleared the platform, the entire chamber exploded with light. Ancient systems hummed to life throughout the ruins. The wall symbols blazed with brilliant colors and began moving like living things. The air itself seemed to sing with harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate. Incredible, Ythara whispered. her scanners overloading from the sudden energy surge. The entire complex is activating. Power levels are off my scales. Vextar staggered backward, his mental senses overwhelmed. So many voices, he gasped. The chamber is full of consciousness, not living beings, but stored thoughts and memories. Thousands of years of history all awakening at once. Krosnook braced himself as the floor shook. The mountain moves, he said in amazement. Whatever this place truly is, it is far larger than we believed. Sarah stood in the center of it all, holding the sword that seemed to weigh nothing in her hands. The blade showed her more images, star maps, technical diagrams, the locations of other chambers on other worlds. This was not just one hidden ruin. It was part of a network that spanned the galaxy, but with the knowledge came responsibility. The ancient race had not just left behind pretty lights and interesting artifacts. They had left behind technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever, and they had chosen humans to decide what should be done with it. The wall symbols were readable now, flowing across the crystal surfaces in patterns that somehow made perfect sense to Sarah's mind. She could understand the language of the builders, as if she had grown up speaking it. Warning, the walls said in their flowing script. The Guardians wake. The test is not complete. The worthy one must prove their strength not through claiming the blade, but through wisdom in using it. Sarah, Vexitar said urgently. Something is happening throughout the complex. My mental senses detect movement in the deeper chambers. Large things, awakening after long sleep. Krosnook pointed to side passages that Sarah had not noticed before. New tunnels have opened. I hear the sound of metal moving through stone. Yathara's computers chimed with warning signals. Massive energy signatures approaching our location. Whatever we have awakened, it is big and it is coming this way. Sarah looked at the sword in her hands, understanding beginning to dawn. Lifting. The blade had not been the end of the test. It had been the beginning. The real trial was about to start. The first Guardian emerged from the tunnel with a sound like grinding stone and screaming metal. It stood 3 meters tall, built like a walking fortress of dark metal and glowing crystal. Its 4 arms ended in weapons that Sarah could not identify, and its single red eye focused on the expedition team with obvious hostile intent. Run, Krosnook said simply, and for the first time since Sarah had known him, the mighty Granite Clan engineer sounded afraid. They ran. The team scattered toward different tunnels as more Guardians poured into the chamber. These were not mindless machines. Sarah could see intelligence in their movements as they coordinated their attack, cutting off escape routes and herding the expedition members like prey. Sarah clutched the sword as she sprinted down a narrow passage, her human legs working hard to keep up with Vextar's graceful stride. Behind them, the sounds of energy weapons and Krosnook's roars echoed through the complex. The sword, Vextar said as they ran. It must be the key to controlling them. Try to communicate with it. Sarah looked at the blade while running. The images flowing across its surface had changed, now showing tactical displays and Guardian locations throughout the complex. She could see her teammates as glowing dots, scattered through the ruins with red enemy markers closing in on all of them. I can see where everyone is, she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. But I do not know how to stop the Guardians. They reached a junction where the tunnel split 3 ways. Vextar pressed his back against the wall and extended his mental senses. Yathara went left, but there are Guardians ahead of her. Krosnook is holding his ground in the main chamber, but he is outnumbered. Sarah touched the sword to the wall, hoping for inspiration. The moment the blade made contact with the crystal surface, new information flooded her mind. The Guardians were not trying to kill them. They were testing them. Each team member faced challenges designed to reveal their true nature. It is not an attack, Sarah realized. It is an examination. The Guardians want to know who we are. They have an interesting way of showing it, Vextar replied as energy blasts lit up the tunnel behind them. Dr. Kithara just sent a distress signal. She is trapped in the lower levels. Through the sword's connection, Sarah could sense what each Guardian was looking for. They were not just testing strength or intelligence, they were measuring character, how each person responded under pressure, whether they worked together, or abandoned their teammates, whether they used their abilities to help or only to save themselves. "We have to help the others," Sarah said. "But not by fighting, by showing the Guardians who we really are." Vextar looked confused. "How?" Sarah studied the tactical display flowing across the sword's blade. "Ythara is trapped because she is trying to solve her way out. The Guardian facing her will not be defeated by calculations. Krosnuk is fighting because that is what his people do. But the Guardian testing him wants to see something else." She turned to face the direction where Ythara was trapped. "Come on, we need to help her first." They found the Mindweaver scholar, backed into a dead-end chamber, facing a Guardian that looked like a living geometric puzzle. As Ythara threw formula after formula at it, the machine simply rearranged itself into new configurations. "The mathematical approaches are ineffective," Ythara called out when she saw them. "This entity operates on principles that defy logical analysis." Sarah approached the Guardian slowly, the sword held at her side in a non-threatening position. Through the blade's connection, she could sense what the machine was really testing. It did not want to see Ythara's intelligence. It wanted to see her wisdom. "Ythara," Sarah said gently, "stop trying to solve it. The Guardian does not want to be defeated. It wants to be understood." "That makes no sense," the scholar replied, but something in Sarah's voice made her pause. "Trust me," Sarah said. "Put down your weapons and scanners, just look at it, really look." Ythara hesitated, then slowly lowered her devices. For the first time since entering the chamber, she simply observed the Guardian without trying to analyze it. The machine stopped shifting its configuration and stood still. In the silence, Ythara's expression changed. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "The way it moves, the patterns it creates. It is not a puzzle to be solved. It is art to be appreciated." The Guardian's red eye dimmed to a soft blue, and it stepped aside to let them pass. "One down," Sarah said. "Now let us help." Krosnuk, they found the engineer in the main chamber, locked in combat with a Guardian that matched his strength. The two Titans crashed back and forth across the crystal floor, neither able to gain an advantage. Krosnuk's face showed frustration and growing exhaustion. "Krosnuk, stop fighting," Sarah called out. "Cannot stop," the big alien grunted as he wrestled with the Guardian. "Must prove strength. Must win." "You do not need to prove anything," Sarah said, walking closer despite the danger. "The Guardian is not testing your strength. It is testing your heart." The sword showed her images of Krosnuk's past, how he had always used his incredible strength to protect others, to build rather than destroy, to lift up those who had fallen. The Guardian was not his enemy. It was his reflection. "Remember why you became an engineer," Sarah said. "You did not join this expedition to fight. You came to build understanding between our peoples." Krosnuk hesitated, and in that moment of doubt the Guardian could have overpowered him. Instead, it also stopped fighting and extended one metallic hand in a gesture of greeting. Krosnuk stared at the offered hand, then slowly reached out to clasp it. The Guardian's eye shifted to blue, and it bowed respectfully before stepping back. The next hour was spent reaching the other team members, each time teaching them that the Guardians were not enemies to be defeated, but tests to be understood. Dr. Kythera discovered that her Guardian wanted to see compassion, not power. Captain Vorth learned that his Guardian valued cooperation over dominance. One by one, the red eyes turned blue as each team member passed their individual test. But Sarah sensed that the real trial was still ahead. Through the sword's connection, she could feel a massive presence stirring in the deepest parts of the complex. Something much larger and more powerful than the Guardians they had already faced. "There is something else down there," she told the reassembled team as they gathered. "In the main chamber. Something that has been sleeping for a very long time." Vextar nodded grimly. "I sense it too. Ancient beyond measure and patient as stone. It has been waiting for someone to claim the sword." The floor began to shake, and new passages opened. In the chamber walls, But these were not narrow tunnels, they were wide corridors that led down into the heart of the planet. "The final guardian," Yathara said, reading energy signatures that made her instrument struggle. "Whatever it is the size of a building." Sarah looked at her teammates, brave beings who had followed her trust and passed tests that challenged their deepest nature. They had proven themselves individually, but now they would face something that would test them all together. And Sarah realized that this was what the ancient civilization had really been looking for. Not just one person who could balance different abilities, but a group of different peoples who could work together despite their differences. "We go down together," she said, raising the sword. Its blade glowed with warm light that reflected off the crystal walls. "Whatever is waiting for us, we face it as a team." The guardians that had tested them now formed an honor guard, their blue eyes lighting the way as the expedition descended into the deepest mysteries of the ancient world. The deepest chamber was vast beyond imagination. Their lights could not reach the walls or ceiling, making them feel like they were standing in an underground cathedral built for giants. In the center of this enormous space sat something that took Sarah's breath away. A tree. Not a living tree, but something made of the same crystal and metal as the rest of the complex. Its trunk was as wide as a building, its branches reaching up into the darkness above. Each leaf was a perfect crystal that glowed with soft internal light, and hanging from every branch were what looked like seeds of pure energy. "Magnificent," Yathara whispered, her scanners working frantically to process what they were seeing. "The energy readings are incredible. This structure is generating enough power to run a city." As they approached the crystal tree, Sarah felt the sword in. Her hands grow warm, images float across its blade, not the technical displays she had seen before, but something deeper. Memories. The last thoughts of an entire civilization. She saw them as they really had been, not gods or heroes, but people very much like humans. They had built cities and explored space, fallen in love and raised families, made mistakes and tried to learn from them. But they had also seen something coming that filled them with both sadness and hope. Their children were evolving, becoming more specialized with each generation. Some developed incredible mental powers, but lost their emotional connections. Others became pure emotion but could no longer think clearly. Still others gained amazing physical abilities but lost their creativity and curiosity. They were becoming like the races Sarah knew. The Zephyrians with their mental powers, the Granite Clan with their strength, the Mind Weavers with their intelligence. Each group was amazing at one thing but limited in others. The ancient people had realized they were watching the birth of the modern galaxy's civilizations. Their children would scatter across the stars and become the ancestors of every spacefaring race. But in gaining those specialized abilities, they would lose something precious, the balance that made them complete beings. So they had built this place, and others like it, as a gift for the future. A treasure that could only be claimed by someone who still carried the spark of what they had been. Someone balanced, curious, adaptable, and wise enough to use great power responsibly. "Sarah," Vexitar said softly, "something is happening to the tree." As Sarah approached with the sword, the crystal tree began to change. The energy seeds on its branches pulsed brighter, and new information flowed into her mind through the blades. Connection. The tree was not just a monument or a power source. It was a database containing the accumulated knowledge of the ancient civilization. Everything they had learned about science, art, philosophy, and the secrets of life itself was stored in those glowing crystal leaves. But more than that, it was a tool. With the right knowledge, the tree could reshape dead planets, create new ecosystems, even guide the evolution of life itself. It was the power to be gods of creation rather than destruction. Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The sword had chosen her not because she was human, but because humanity still carried the balance the ancients had valued. The ability to think and feel and dream and act all at the same time. "The power is yours to claim," a voice said in her mind, not Vextar's telepathy, but something older and sadder. The last echo of the ancient civilization, preserved in the crystal tree. But know that claiming it changes everything. Your species will become the guardians of our legacy, responsible for ensuring this knowledge serves life rather than destroying it. Sarah looked at her teammates, seeing them clearly for the first time. Vextar's mental powers were incredible, but they came with the price of emotional distance. Krosnuk's strength was unmatched, but his people struggled with change. Ythara's intelligence was amazing, but she sometimes forgot that not everything could be solved with mathematics. Each race had gained something powerful, but lost something essential. They were like fingers on a hand, each important but only truly effective when working together. "What if," Sarah said aloud, "the choice is not just mine to make?" The voice in her mind paused, surprised. "Explain." "You left this treasure for someone balanced enough to use it wisely," Sarah said. "But wisdom includes knowing when you need help. Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes, get emotional, act without thinking. We might misuse this power just like anyone else." She turned to face her teammates. "But together we balance each other out. Vextar's mental clarity helps when emotions run too high. Krosnuk's strength supports us when we are weak. Ythara's logic guides us when we are confused." The ancient voice grew interested. "You would share the guardianship?" "I would create a council," Sarah said, the idea forming as she spoke. "Representatives from every race, with humans as mediators. No one species controlling this power, but all of them working together to use it responsibly." She raised the sword toward the crystal tree. "Your people were not perfect either. That is why they were evolving, changing, becoming different races. Maybe the real lesson is not that one species should guard your legacy, but that all species need each other to be complete." The tree pulsed with brighter light, and Sarah felt approval from the ancient presence. "Wisdom beyond your years, young guardian. Yes, this is what we hoped for, but were afraid to dream. Unity without uniformity. Strength through cooperation rather than domination." The sword in Sarah's hands began to change, becoming lighter and more graceful. The blade split into 7 parts, still connected but now able to be shared among the council members. Each piece carried part of the tree's knowledge and power, but none could function alone. "The legacy is yours," the voice said, growing fainter as its long watch finally ended. "All of yours. Use it well, and perhaps the galaxy will finally learn what we could not teach our own children." Vextar stepped forward first, accepting one piece of the transformed sword. "For the Zephyrian people, I pledge our mental gifts to this council's wisdom." Krosnuk was next, his massive hand gentle as he took his share. "The Granite clan offers our strength to protect this sacred trust." Ythara floated forward, her large eyes bright with possibility. "The Mind Weavers contribute our knowledge to serve the greater good." One by one, the other expedition members accepted their pieces, each pledging their species' abilities to the common cause. When it was done, Sarah held the central piece, not the largest or most powerful, but the one that connected all the others. The crystal tree's light faded to a gentle glow, but its knowledge remained accessible through the shared sword. The expedition team now carried the greatest treasure in the galaxy, but more importantly, they carried the responsibility to use it wisely. As they made their way back to the surface, Sarah thought about what they had learned. The ancient civilization had not failed. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Their children had indeed scattered across the galaxy and become the modern races. But instead of losing their legacy, they had simply been waiting for the right moment to reclaim it. The moment when all those scattered children could come together again, not as one people, but as one community. Different species working together, each contributing their unique gifts while tempering their individual weaknesses. Standing under the alien stars of Kethmaran, Sarah looked at her teammates and saw the future of the galaxy. Not human dominance or alien superiority, but something better. Cooperation between equals, each race bringing their strengths to bear on the challenges ahead. The sword's central piece hummed quietly in her hand, and she smiled. The ancient people had been right to wait. The galaxy was finally ready for their gift, and humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or servants, but as the bridge builders who helped everyone else remember that they were stronger together than apart.